On Monday morning, Jesus and a select band of his followers made their way down the slopes of the Mount of Olives once again and entered the temple. On the south side of the huge temple compound was an area where the money changers operated and where animals that were ritually acceptable for sacrifice were sold. From a Jewish point of view, there was nothing wrong with either of these activities. The popular idea that Jesus objected to money changing in the temple is incorrect. Jews from all over the world brought coinage of all types as offerings to the temple, and it was necessary to have some standard of evaluation and conversion. There was also a need for people to be able to purchase sacrificial animals right at the temple, rather than to try to bring them from afar, especially at Passover, when hundreds of thousands of pilgrims required one lamb per household. Some have assumed that the money changing had to do with converting coins with pagan images and slogans to Jewish coinage that was considered religiously acceptable. The very opposite was the case. The only coins accepted at the Jerusalem temple were silver Tyrian shekels and half shekels, which had the image of Hercules on one side and an eagle perched on the bow of a ship on the other. The issue was not pagan images, but consistency of value. Tyrian shekels were guaranteed to be made up of 95% pure silver. The Sadducean priests who ran the temple conveniently argued that the purity of one's offering to God superseded any defilement that the images might bring. At Passover, the money-changing operation was vastly expanded, since Moses had commanded that each male Jew over the age of 20 donate a half shekel of silver to the sanctuary once a year. The profit from these activities was enormous. The Jerusalem temple had the most lucrative system of temple commerce in the entire Roman world. As one might expect, there were certain fees and surcharges added to these services. These funds went to support the wealthy class of Sadducean priests who had their lavish homes just west of the temple compound in the area called the Jewish Quarter of the Old City today. These priests in turn worked closely with their Roman sponsors. To understand the economy in Jerusalem, which really was a type of temple state, one needs only to follow the money. Jesus arrived that Monday morning at the very height of the trade season. He had 3 words on his mind: Zechariah, Isaiah, and Jeremiah. At the very end of Zechariah's sequential scenario of the end times, he declares, "And there will no longer be traders in the house of Yahweh of hosts on that day." Jeremiah had gone into the temple of his day, the first temple built by King Solomon, and declared in the name of Yahweh, "Has this house, which is called by my name, become a den of robbers in your sight?" And Isaiah had envisioned a time when God's temple at Jerusalem would become a house of prayer for all nations, providing a spiritual center for humanity. Jesus' activities that day were not intended to change things or to spark a revolution. Like his ride down the Mount of Olives on the foal of the donkey, he intended to signal something, namely that the imminent overthrow of the corrupt temple system was at hand, and the vision of the prophets would be fulfilled. He began to overturn the tables of the money changers and topple the pay stations of those who sat taking money for the sale of the animals. He then quoted the words of Jeremiah and Isaiah as an explanation for his actions. Mark also adds that he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. There were certain narrow gates through which goods had to pass to support the exchange and sales activities, and Jesus stationed several of his rugged Galilean men at these posts and told them business was closed for the day. The priestly leadership heard about the ruckus. They already had been looking for a way to have Jesus arrested and killed. They were more determined than ever to stop him, but they feared the people. The crowd must have been immense that Monday morning, and the crush of people cheered on Jesus. This was not a riot for which the priests might call in the Romans. They would be reluctant to do that anyway, since the governor Pontius Pilate was known for his brutal handling of temple crowds, and his disdain for the Jews in general. Jesus' actions were a symbolic prophetic protest, and he had the support of the people, who were likely tired of paying the prices demanded to fulfill these ritual requirements. Mark indicates the siege lasted the entire day, and it was only at evening that Jesus and his men left the city and went back to Bethany for the night. Tuesday was an important day for Jesus and his council of 12. They openly went back to the temple early that morning, and Jesus spent the entire day verbally sparring with various segments of the temple establishment, including the Sadducean priests, leading Pharisees, and the Herodians, the political supporters of Herod's dynasty. The Pharisees and Herodians asked Jesus whether he supported Roman taxation, perhaps the most sensitive political and religious issue of the day. Holding up a Roman coin, he replied with his now famous but ambiguous retort, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." Jesus said two things that day that seemed to epitomize his entire view of true religion. A man asked Jesus which of the commandments of the Torah was the greatest. Jesus quoted the Shema, that great confession of the Jewish faith. "Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our God, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength." He added that the second greatest commandment was to love one's fellow human being as oneself. The man agreed and observed that if one loved God and loved one's fellow as oneself, that would be much more than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. Jesus then made a surprising statement to the man. "You are not far from the kingdom of God." This indicates that Jesus' view of the kingdom of God involved not only the revolutionary overthrow of the kingdoms of the world, but also a certain spiritual insight into what God most desires from human beings. One would not be complete without the other. Throughout the day, the crowds were amazed and thrilled at all Jesus said. The Gospels report repeatedly that Jesus' enemies wanted to arrest him but feared the crowds. The temple officials knew their only hope was to arrest Jesus when he was alone, maybe at night, with only a few of his followers around. Passover was 2 days away, and they had no idea what Jesus had in mind or of what he might be capable. They determined that they had to act fast.